The sea was black and angry, and the carrier's deck moved like the chest of a sleeping giant. Somewhere in the early 1950s, under overcast North Atlantic skies, a Royal Navy carrier steamed into the wind. On the flight deck, arcs of yellow light marked the landing area, swallowed and revealed again as spray blew across the bow. Downwind, a single jet turned onto final approach, nose high, gear down, throttle humming just above a stall. In the cockpit, the pilot could see almost nothing but a strip of wildly shifting light. On glideslope, "We think," the landing signal officer muttered on the port side, standing in his tiny box, paddles in hand. The LSO watched the incoming aircraft against the horizon and the rising, falling deck, feeling every correction in his own knees. One wrong signal, one late call, and another young man would die in peacetime. Up on the island, a lean officer in a wrinkled jacket watched in tight-lipped silence. Lieutenant Commander Nicholas. Nick Goodhart wasn't just another pilot. He was a test pilot and engineer, a man who had stared at more accident reports than he liked to admit. Every time a jet came down, he saw the same pattern. The last 10 seconds could go from perfect to fatal without warning. The jet came in a little flat, riding a low, shallow curve toward the stern. Come on," the LSO urged, paddles flicking frantically. The pilot added power. The engine hesitated. The ship dropped into a trough. In an instant, the approach unraveled, wheels slamming onto the deck, a bounce, a miss of the wire, then metal shrieking as the jet plowed into the barriers and crumpled among parked aircraft. Another peacetime. Wreck. Another miracle if the pilot crawled out alive. Goodhart turned away, jaw clenched. It wasn't enough to tell men to fly better anymore. If carrier aviation was going to survive the jet age, someone had to change what pilots saw on final before the sea killed any more of them. To really understand what Goodhart was up against, you have to picture what carrier flying looked like when jets first went to sea. In World War II, propeller aircraft like Seafires, Hellcats, and Avengers already made carrier decks dangerous places, but at least their engines answered quickly when you moved the throttle. You got power in a heartbeat. If you were a little low on approach, you could slam the lever forward and usually claw your way out. The jet age changed that. Early carrier jets came in heavier and faster. Their landing speeds climbed. Their engines, especially at low power, were lazy. You shoved the throttle forward and then waited. Seconds ticked by before the thrust caught up. On a runway ashore, you had room to ride that out. On a carrier, you were seconds away from the back end of the ship. The ships themselves hadn't caught up either. Flight decks were still straight, axial strips down the middle of the carrier. You landed aiming at the bow, with parked aircraft, fuel hoses, and deck crew all just ahead of the arrestor wires. If you caught a wire, you stopped short of the obstacles. If you didn't get a second chance. You plowed straight into whatever was waiting for you. There was almost no such thing as a safe miss. The system leaned heavily on one human being, the landing signal officer, or LSO, the batsman. He stood on the port side, waving paddles or a lighted wand, judging your approach by eye. Too high, too low, a little fast. He tried to talk you down with gestures and voice calls in the last desperate seconds. It was part science, part art, and part luck, and the numbers were brutal. Even in peacetime, carrier flying was killing aircrew at a rate no one would tolerate today. Many pilots could expect to lose a fifth of their squadron to accidents over a career. In post-war briefings, officers quietly admitted that carrier aviation might simply not survive the jet era if something didn't change. Goodhart saw the problem in painfully simple terms. Pilots were guessing their way down a moving glide path with almost no precise feedback. He didn't want them to fly better. He wanted to give them a way to see better. Nick Goodhart wasn't supposed to be a revolutionary. On paper, he was just another solid officer on the long post-war career conveyor belt. He joined the Royal Navy as an engineer, learned how ships and machines actually worked before he ever strapped into an aircraft. During the war, he'd seen combat, watched ships burn, watched aircraft disappear into the sea. Afterward, instead of leaving danger behind, he went to the Empire Test Pilots School, the place where you volunteered to fly the awkward, the experimental, and the outright dangerous in order to make them safer for everyone else. By the early 1950s, Goodhart had flown pretty much everything the Fleet Air Arm could throw at him: pistons, early jets, odd hybrids like the Wyvern, aircraft that seemed to have been designed first and forgiven later. He'd bounced on decks in calm seas and frighteningly rough ones. He'd walked away from a couple of incidents that could easily have gone the other way. A lot of other men didn't walk away. He saw it in the paperwork first. Accident summaries, mishap charts, typed up lines that began with "during recovery" and ended with "aircraft lost, pilot killed." Same pattern again and again. Approach normal, line up reasonable. Then in the last few seconds, something tiny went wrong. A gust, a delayed throttle response, a misjudged sink rate. One bad cue from a tired LSO. He saw it on the flight deck, too. A pilot he'd just briefed with in the ready room now being cut out of twisted metal. A squadron photo with more and more faces quietly gone. At first, like everyone else, he tried to fix it with better lectures, tighter procedures, more detailed approach, diagrams. But the reports didn't change. The funerals didn't stop. One night, sitting in a wardroom with an untouched cup of tea going cold in his hand, it hit him with uncomfortable clarity. The pilots weren't failing the system. The system was failing the pilots. If you wanted different results, you couldn't just shout at men to be braver or smoother on the controls. You had to change the picture in front of them in those last 10 seconds. You had to give them a way to see the perfect path, not just hope they were on it. The idea that would change carrier flying forever didn't arrive in a cockpit or on a wind-swept deck. It showed up in an office with a borrowed makeup mirror. Goodhart had been wrestling with the same question for weeks. How do you show a pilot, in one simple glance, whether he's too high, too low, or exactly where he should be on the glide path, without relying on a human waving paddles? He knew what he wanted, some kind of reference that ignored the pitching deck and the heaving sea, something tied to a fixed, invisible line in space, the ideal glide slope. One day, in a Ministry of Supply office, he was thinking out loud when his secretary, half amused, half curious, handed him her compact. "Can you use this for your flying, Commander?" she joked. He turned it over in his hands, then had an idea. "Draw a line across it," he said. She frowned, then dragged a lipstick line straight across the middle of the little mirror. Goodhart propped it on a stack of files, angled it under a desk lamp, and stepped back. "Now humor me," he said. "Move your head up and down." As she did, the reflection of the lamp shifted in the glass, above the line, then below it, then right on it. "There," Goodhart said quietly. "That's the approach." In that simple motion was the whole concept, a bright ball of light that moved relative to a fixed datum line. Too high, the ball rides above. Too low, it sinks below. Keep it on the line, and you're on the perfect path. From that lipstick demonstration, Goodhart sketched out the mirror deck landing system, a stabilized mirror mounted on the port side of the flight deck. A bright light projected into it, forming a glowing orb the pilot could see from miles out. Horizontal rows of green lights on either side, marking the correct glide path. If the ball sat level with those datum lights, you were golden. If not, you corrected, nose, and power, until it did. No guessing off the deck edge, no waiting for last-second paddles. Just one glowing cue to fly the ball all the way in. When he presented the idea, some old hands scoffed. "You want us to trust a mirror instead of a batsman?" One LSO snorted. Goodhart didn't flinch. "I want you to have one more tool," he said. "One that doesn't get tired." The Admiralty, watching accident numbers climb, agreed to at least give the makeup mirror a try. The first time the mirror went to sea, it didn't look like the future. It looked like a metal science project bolted to the side of a battleship-sized target. On the flight deck of HMS Illustrious, the engineers had mounted a polished concave mirror on the port side near the stern, framed by rows of green lights. Behind it, a bright source lamp was aligned so that, when it hit the mirror just right, it threw a glowing spot of light out into space. From the deck, it wasn't much to look at. From the air, it was supposed to be everything. The pilots were skeptical. In the ready room, a small group of chosen aviators, Goodhart among them, sat through the briefing. A young officer with a pointer tapped a diagram on the board, showing a little aircraft and a perfect invisible funnel down to the deck. "You will see a bright, ball of light," he said, stumbling over the new term. "That is your reference. These green lamps are the datum. Keep the ball level with the datum all the way down. Don't chase the deck. Fly the ball." Someone in the back muttered, "And if the ball lies?" "Then we all go swimming," another replied. Out over gray water, the first test jet turned onto final. From his cockpit, the pilot saw the carrier as a smudge at first, then a box, then a strip of deck. Off to the left of the landing area, something else glowed, a small sharp point of yellow light flanked by green dots, the ball. "Okay," he breathed. "Let's see if you're telling the truth." At first, the ball sat high, above the green line. He eased the nose down. Slowly, it sank toward the datum. A swell lifted the ship. The deck rose, then fell, but the ball stayed rock steady, tied not to the carrier's heave, but to that fixed glide path. For once, the last seconds of the approach felt organized instead of chaotic. The pilot kept his eyes locked on the ball, made tiny power corrections, watched it sit neatly on the line. The wires rushed up. The hook caught. The jet slammed down, then stopped in a clean, firm trap. No bounce, no lurch into the barriers. Just a landing that felt almost boring. On the island, Goodhart exhaled slowly. One trap didn't prove anything. But by the end of the day, after dozens of approaches, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Touchdown points were tighter, sink rates more controlled, and the LSOs were using their paddles more for reassurance than emergency surgery. For the first time in years, the last 10 seconds of a carrier landing looked like something you could tame. After the first trials, the mirror didn't stay a quirky experiment for long. Reports went up the chain. Pilots liked it. LSOs liked it. Touchdowns were more consistent. Fewer cut-it-fine moments, fewer bolters that turned into wrecks. On the graphs in staff offices, those cold lines that stood in for living men, something remarkable started to happen. The accident curve bent downward. More carriers got mirrors, and each new installation was a little better. Brighter lights, clearer datum bars, improved stabilization. Across the ocean, the U.S. Navy took notice. By the mid-1950s, American decks had their own versions. The same glowing ball, the same green lights, the same simple command baked into every approach. Fly the ball, not the boat. At the same time, another British idea was joining it: the angled flight deck. Instead of landing straight toward the bow, pilots now aimed for a runway painted at a slight angle off the center line. Miss the wire, and you could add power and fly again, instead of plowing straight into parked aircraft. Mirror plus angle. A new picture and a second chance. Navies kept score. Where there had once been dozens of landing accidents per 10,000 traps, the numbers fell to a fraction of that. On some ships, an 80% reduction in just a few years. Pilots still sweated every recovery. The sea still heaved. Engines still failed. But for the first time in carrier history, the last 10 seconds of flight were no longer a coin toss between okay landing and fatal crash. They were a problem with a clear, bright answer hanging off the port side. If you ask most carrier pilots today who invented the thing they call the ball on, a lot of them shrug. Nicholas Goodhart didn't chase fame. He kept flying, kept testing, kept nudging dangerous ideas into safer shapes. He rose through the ranks, eventually wearing a rear admiral's uniform. Off-duty, he threw himself into gliding, another world where the art of holding a perfect glide path meant the difference between elegance and a broken aircraft. Somewhere along the way, honors came. The United States Navy awarded him the Legion of Merit. Historians began quietly pointing out that his mirror system, married to the angled deck, had saved not dozens but thousands of lives and aircraft. But on every modern carrier, his real memorial is simpler: a small glowing ball of light that every pilot trusts with their life, every single landing. Stories like Goodhart's remind us that not every war-changing invention is a new weapon. Sometimes it's a mirror, a light, and one stubborn pilot who's tired of burying friends. What you've heard is rooted in real carrier history, real accident stats, and real people. But some dialogue, thoughts, and small moments are dramatized to bring that history to life. For deep research, always go to professional historians and archives. If you want more forgotten World War II and Cold War stories like this, help keep them alive. Hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if anyone in your family ever flew the ball.